I was kneeling in the mud, fighting to save my vines from an early frost, when a $300 champagne cork slammed into my shoulder. The sharp pop echoed across the vineyard a split second before the impact. It hit hard enough to sting through the heavy waterproof fabric, a ridiculous little missile launched from somewhere far above me. I flinched and looked up, pushing damp hair out of my eyes. On the terrace of my own villa stood my sister, Bella. She was dressed in a flowing white gown that caught the late afternoon sun and shimmered like something out of a bridal magazine. One hand curved elegantly around the stem of a champagne flute. The other rested lightly on the arm of a tall, perfectly tailored man I assumed was her fiancé. Flanking them were an older couple who practically radiated generational wealth. Posture perfect, expressions measured, the kind of people who never needed to raise their voices because the world already bent toward them. Bella laughed, bright and theatrical, and then she pointed directly at me. "Don't worry about the gardener," she said lightly. "She's just a hired hand we keep around out of pity." A ripple of polite laughter moved through the guests. She didn't realize that the hired hand she had just dismissed owns the deed to the entire estate. She also didn't know I was supposed to be in Paris right now, attending meetings and sipping espresso in between vineyard tours. I had come home early. She thought she had orchestrated the perfect crime. Every detail calculated, every risk minimized. I was about to turn her dream engagement party into a crime scene investigation. To understand why I was kneeling in freezing mud on a Friday afternoon instead of seated at a cafe in St. Germain, you have to understand the single most consuming obsession of my life: Aldridge Estate and Winery. My name is Catherine Aldridge. I'm 34 years old and I own and operate one of Napa Valley's most respected boutique vineyards. Behind my back, the staff calls me the Ice Queen. They're not wrong. I don't waste time on idle chatter. I don't smile for the sake of making other people comfortable. I arrive before sunrise and leave long after the last employee clocks out. I walk every row of vines myself. I taste from every barrel before it's bottled. I personally approve every label that leaves this property. Some people interpret that as cold. I call it precision. There's a difference. 2 weeks ago, I had a business trip to Paris carefully scheduled. Meetings with French distributors, private tours through Bordeaux estates, strategic networking that keeps a boutique winery like mine competitive in an industry dominated by conglomerates and legacy brands. The calendar had been cleared, staff briefed, flights booked, hotels confirmed, every hour accounted for. Then the forecast changed. An unusual cold front began pushing south from Canada, bringing with it the threat of an early frost severe enough to wipe out my entire $1 million Merlot harvest. The grapes were at that dangerous threshold, ripe enough to harvest, not yet picked. One sustained freeze would rupture the skins and reduce months of labor to worthless pulp. I didn't hesitate. I canceled Paris the same night the forecast updated, rebooked the earliest flight home, landed, grabbed my car, and drove straight from the airport to the North Vineyard. I didn't even change properly. I pulled on the first heavy-duty work clothes I found in the mudroom: waterproof coveralls, knee-high rubber boots, a wool cap dragged low against the wind. The soil was already stiff with cold. Mud clung to everything, thick and stubborn. I directed the crew as they rolled out wind machines and activated frost protection sprinklers, the irrigation system misting the vines in a protective layer that would freeze and insulate the fruit. I dropped to my knees and pressed my bare fingers into the soil, measuring temperature by feel as much as by instrument, calculating how many hours we had left before the real freeze descended. That was when I heard engines. At first I assumed it was a supply truck arriving early, but when I straightened and looked beyond the vine rows, I saw something very different. A convoy of black luxury limousines winding slowly up the long private driveway toward the main villa. They moved in deliberate procession, polished to mirror shine, like a funeral escort for someone extraordinarily wealthy and important. Confusion hardened into alarm. The estate calendar was supposed to be empty during my absence. The tasting room had been closed for deep cleaning. Event staff were off for the week. Only essential maintenance personnel were scheduled. There should not have been a single guest on this property. I began walking toward the villa, boots sinking into wet earth with every step. From the North Vineyard to the main house is nearly a quarter mile. The stone mansion my great-grandfather built in 1921 rose ahead of me. Arched windows, ivy-covered walls, terraces overlooking acres of cultivated land that had taken generations to build. As I drew closer, the sound reached me clearly. Music, laughter, crystal striking crystal. A party. Someone was hosting a party inside my home. I moved along the side of the property, keeping low behind manicured hedgerows that bordered the formal gardens. When I reached the stone terrace overlooking the valley, the full picture came into view. At least 40 guests filled the space. Cocktail dresses, tailored suits, champagne flutes catching sunlight. waitstaff in black vests weaving through the crowd with silver trays. A string quartet played near the fountain, something classical and deliberately refined. And at the center of it all stood Bella, 27 years old, 7 years younger than me. We might as well have been raised on different planets. Where I am blunt and pragmatic, she is charming and strategic. While I built a business from soil and spreadsheets, she floated between acting auditions and wealthy boyfriends, always certain something easier would come along. Our parents adored her, their beautiful, magnetic youngest child. We hadn't spoken in 6 months. The last time she'd called asking for money to cover rent. I'd refused. She'd accused me of being heartless. I'd ended the call. Now she stood on my terrace as if she owned it. I stepped forward, ready to confront her. That was when the champagne cork hit me. It struck my shoulder with surprising force, ricocheted off my mud-streaked coveralls, and fell into the grass at my feet. Every head on the terrace turned toward me. I must have looked feral, covered in mud from head to toe, hair flattened by damp wool, boots thick with vineyard soil. "Don't worry about the gardener," she said smoothly. "She's just a hired hand we keep around out of pity." The older woman beside her, Margaret Sterling, I would later learn, looked at me with open distaste, as if I were an unfortunate blemish on an otherwise perfect afternoon. Bella added with false sweetness, "She manages things for the family. A bit greedy, a bit difficult, best not to engage." Rage detonated inside my chest. I could have exposed her then, announced to the entire estate that I owned every acre beneath their polished shoes, that Bella was trespassing, that this event was unauthorized. But I saw the calculation in her eyes. If I caused a scene, she would cry. She would twist the narrative. She would make me the unstable older sister trying to sabotage her happiness. So I did something she would never anticipate. I stayed silent. I let them believe the lie. I turned away and walked around the side of the villa toward the staff entrance near the kitchen. Behind me, the music resumed. Laughter swelled again, as if nothing significant had happened. But everything had. Bella had studied my travel plans, forged authority, brought strangers into my home, opened my cellars, served my wine. She had planned this meticulously. I slipped through the staff entrance, mud streaking across polished tile. I needed answers before I delivered consequences. The service hallway was narrow and harshly lit by humming fluorescent tubes, industrial carpet, white painted walls, the unseen machinery behind the estate's elegance. I had walked this corridor thousands of times, never as an intruder in my own house. Water dripped from my coveralls. My boots left dark prints behind me. I didn't slow down. The executive office door was at the end of the hall. I pushed it open without knocking. Sarah looked up from her computer, eyes widening instantly. "Miss Aldridge? I thought you were in Paris." Sarah Miller was 24, fresh out of hospitality school, eager and efficient but inexperienced. The type who followed written instructions carefully. The type who would trust an official-looking email. "Why is there a party at my mansion, Sarah?" Her face went pale. "I thought you approved it. I received an email." "Show me." Her fingers trembled as she opened her inbox and turned the screen toward me. There it was. Catherine.aldridge@aldridgeestate.com. Almost identical to my real address. Except mine ends in aldridgewinery.com. One missing letter. The message granted Bella access to the villa free of charge, instructed staff to coordinate catering, directed them not to disturb me in Paris. I read it twice. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't boundary pushing. It was deliberate impersonation, premeditated fraud. "It's not your fault," I said evenly. "You followed instructions you believed were legitimate." Relief and fear warred across Sarah's face. I picked up the service request clipboard from her desk. "Show me what they ordered." The list was obscene. Kobe beef, white truffles, lobster tail, a custom 7-tier cake flown in from San Francisco, cases of vintage champagne, $6,000 in floral installations, a string quartet, valet service. Then the line that tightened my jaw. Open vintage wine cellar, guest selection permitted. My grandfather's collection. Bottles worth thousands each. Total estimated cost, $85,400 for an afternoon fantasy. "From this moment forward, you answer only to me," I told Sarah. "Stay here. If Bella asks, you're unavailable." She nodded quickly. On the edge of her desk sat the portable credit card terminal we use for private events. I picked it up and slid it into my coverall pocket. I'm going to need this. Then I headed for the basement security wing. My boots squelched against concrete steps as I descended. The mud on my clothes had begun to stiffen, drying into a rough shell against the fabric. I didn't bother brushing it off. I wanted to look exactly like this when I faced her. The security office door opened with a heavy click of my keycard. Frank Miller looked up from the monitors, broad-shouldered, gray buzz cut. 20 years protecting this property. Catherine? I saw the cars. Sarah said she received a fake email. Bella's hosting a party without authorization. Frank's jaw said, "You want it shut down?" Not yet. I stepped in front of the wall of 12 monitors and located the feed covering the terrace and main dining room. First, I want to see everything. I pulled up a chair and sat down, mud and all, watching my sister's engagement spectacle unfold on camera. The tech room was cramped and utilitarian, concrete walls, humming equipment, the faint smell of circuitry and Stanthoffy. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in an unforgiving glare. Upstairs, there was champagne and music and illusion. Down here, there was only me, Frank, and the truth displayed across 12 security screens. I didn't change clothes. The mud on my coveralls had dried completely now, forming a stiff, uncomfortable shell that pulled at my skin with every movement. It itched terribly. Bits of dried dirt flaked off whenever I shifted in my chair. But I didn't move. I wanted to feel this discomfort. I wanted it to fuel my rage, to remind me exactly why I was about to burn Bella's world to the ground. "Frank," I said, my eyes fixed on the monitors. "Lock down all exits, no one in, no one out." He picked up his radio without hesitation. "Copy that. I'll alert the gate staff." On the main screen, I watched the party unfold in real time. Bella was holding court in the grand ballroom now, surrounded by guests who hung on her every word. The tall man beside her, her fiancé, I assumed, had his arm around her waist. He was handsome in that generic, privileged way. Strong jaw, expensive haircut. The kind of casual confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. Preston Sterling, according to the guest list Sarah had shown me. Heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. Net worth in the billions. The kind of catch that would make Bella's dreams come true. A lifetime of luxury without having to work for any of it. The older couple stood nearby. Margaret Sterling, the silver-haired woman in pearls who'd looked at me like I was dirt, literally, and a man I assumed was Preston's father, equally polished and aristocratic. Frank adjusted the audio feed, and suddenly I could hear them. "Absolutely stunning property," Margaret was saying, her voice crisp and cultured. "How long has it been in your family, Bella dear?" Bella's laugh was musical, practiced. "Oh, generations. My grandfather built the main house in the 20s. The vineyard has been ours ever since." "Lies. All of it lies." "And the management?" Margaret continued. "You mentioned a hired administrator? Catherine?" "Yes." Bella's tone shifted, becoming dismissive. "She's competent enough, I suppose, but she can be difficult. Very territorial about the day-to-day operations. My parents keep her on out of loyalty to her family. They've worked here for decades. But honestly, she's a bit grasping." My fingernails dug into the arms of the chair. Preston spoke up for the first time, his voice smooth and pleasant. "Will that be a problem after the wedding? I thought you said we could use this place as a vacation home." "Oh, it won't be a problem." Bella's smile was radiant on the monitor. "I told you, our grandparents left this estate to my parents. Catherine is just hired help. After the wedding, we can make whatever staffing changes we want. We could even convert part of the vineyard into a golf course if we wanted to." "A golf course!" Margaret clapped her hands. "What a marvelous idea!" I felt Frank tensed beside me. "Boss," he said quietly, "she just committed fraud on camera. We have her dead to rights. Want me to call the sheriff?" I watched Bella on the screen, saw her throw her head back and laugh at something Preston said. She looked so happy, so confident. She genuinely believed she'd gotten away with it. "Not yet," I said. Frank frowned. "Why not?" "Because right now she can claim it was all a misunderstanding, a miscommunication between family members." I pointed at the monitor, where a waiter was approaching Bella with a question. "But if she opens those wine bottles, if she drinks my property without permission, then it's not intent anymore. It's a completed crime. You want to let her finish the party? I want irrefutable proof." I reached into my pocket and felt the weight of the POS machine. I want her to rack up every penny of that bill. I want her to stand in front of those Sterling family billions and play pretend until she can't take it back. Understanding dawned on Frank's face. "And then you walk in." "And then I walk in." He nodded slowly. "All right, I'll keep the team on standby. But Catherine," he hesitated. "What?" "She's your sister." She called me hired help, I said flatly. She told strangers I was greedy and difficult. She tried to steal my life. I turned back to the monitors. She stopped being my sister the moment she sent that fake email. Frank didn't argue. He just nodded and picked up his phone. I'll has the sheriff's hotline ready. When you give the word, I can report grand larceny. Grand larceny. In California, that meant theft of property valued over $10,000. It was a felony. Years in prison if convicted. The wine cellar alone would push the total past that threshold. On the monitor, I watched as a waiter approached with a bottled, dark glass, old label. Even from the grainy security footage, I recognized it. Vintage 1998 Cabernet, one of my grandfather's bottles, worth $5,000. Bella nodded enthusiastically. The waiter opened it, poured 5 glasses, distributed them to Bella, Preston, and his parents. They raised their glasses, toasted, drank. I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not quite satisfaction, not quite revenge, just certainty. Now we wait, I said. We sat in that cramped tech room for over 3 hours, a vigil of anger and patience. I didn't move from the chair, didn't shower, didn't eat, didn't even go to the bathroom. I just sat there, covered in drying mud, watching the party unfold on 12 different screens. Frank brought me water at one point, and I drank it without tasting it. My entire focus was on the monitors, uncataloguing every crime, every transgression, every moment of Bella's delusion. As the afternoon light began to fade around 4:30, they opened a second bottle from the vintage cellar, another $5,000 gone. 45 minutes later, the caterers brought out the Kobe beef, perfectly seared, plated on china I'd inherited from my grandmother. Margaret Sterling declared it divine. By 6 o'clock, Bella was ready to give her speech. She stood on the terrace with Preston, his arm around her shoulders, and thanked everyone for coming to celebrate their engagement. She talked about how excited she was to start this new chapter of her life, how grateful she was to have found a partner who understood her. She didn't mention me once. "This is hard to watch," Frank muttered. I said nothing. The dried mud was cracking on my arms now, falling in tiny flakes onto the floor. My skin underneath felt raw and irritated. I welcomed the discomfort, let myself feel it, let it sharpen the edge of my anger into something clean and surgical. Around 6:45, Margaret Sterling pulled Bella aside for a private conversation in the study. I switched the audio to that room's feed. "Very impressed with the property," Margaret was saying. "Preston has always wanted a wine country retreat. If you're serious about making this available after the wedding, I'd like to discuss terms." "Terms," Bella's voice was careful. "A financial arrangement. We'd purchase a stake in the property, of course. Become partners with your family. I'm thinking something in the neighborhood of $3 million. $3 million. For a share of property Bella didn't own. I felt Frank look at me, but I kept my eyes on the screen. "That's very generous," Bella said slowly. "Think about it," Margaret patted her jant. "Talk to your parents. We can have our lawyers draw something up next week." Bella smiled. "I'll definitely discuss it with them." "Good," Margaret stood. "Now shall we rejoin the party? I believe they're about to cut the cake." They left the study. I switched back to the main ballroom feed. "She's going to sell your property to them," Frank said. "That's her game. Use the engagement to gain their trust, then broker a fake real estate deal." "I know. We should stop this now, before it goes any further." "Not yet." He slammed his hand on the desk. "Catherine, this isn't just about the party anymore. She's setting up a con that could land her in federal prison." "Good. She's your sister." I finally looked at him. She stopped being my sister when she decided I was disposable, when she looked at everything I've built and thought she could just take it. I stood up, dried mud raining off my coveralls. I gave her chances, Frank. I loaned her money. I offered her a job here, real work, with real pay. She turned it down because it wasn't glamorous enough. She wanted the rewards without the effort. And now she's trying to steal them. So you're going to let her commit fraud on camera? I'm going to let her commit every crime she's capable of committing, and then I'm going to make sure she faces every consequence she deserves. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, your call, boss." On the monitor, the party reached its peak. Guests clustered around as the massive cake was wheeled out. 7 tiers of white fondant and gold leaf, topped with sugar flowers that probably cost more than most people's wedding rings. Bella and Preston stood together, holding the knife, smiling for a photographer I hadn't even noticed until now. They cut the first slice together, fed each other bites, kissed while everyone applauded. The clock on the wall struck 7. 4 hours since the champagne cork had hit my shoulder. 4 hours of watching my sister play pretend in my house with my things. I reached into my pocket and felt the POS machine. The weight of it was reassuring, solid, real. "It's time," I said. Frank stood up. "You want the security team?" "Gather them," I said, "but let me enter first. I want them to see me alone." "Understood." I walked to the door, then paused. "Frank, have that sheriff's hotline ready. If she doesn't cooperate, I'm pressing charges immediately." "Will do." I left the tech room and walked back through the staff corridor, retracing my muddy steps from earlier. But this time I wasn't hiding. I wasn't sneaking around my own property like a criminal. This time I was walking toward the main ballroom with purpose. The POS machine sat heavy in my pocket. In my mind, I ran through the numbers one more time. $85,400. Grand larceny, wire fraud, trespassing, impersonation. Bella had built herself a trap out of champagne glasses and lies, and now she was standing in the middle of it, smiling for cameras, dreaming of millions. I was about to spring it. I reached the service door that led to the main ballroom, put my hand on the handle, took one deep breath, and then I pushed it open and stepped into the light. The main doors to the dining room didn't just open, they were thrown wide. I didn't wait for an announcement. I walked straight in. My rubber boots landed with a heavy, wet thud against the polished marble floor, leaving muddy footprints with each step. My coveralls were caked with dried earth that flaked off as I moved, creating a trail of dirt across Margaret Sterling's pristine white runner. My hair, which I deliberately left wild and tangled, hung in matted clumps around my face. I could feel dried mud cracking on my cheeks when I set my jaw. The contrast was perfect. Around me, a sea of silk and satin, champagne flutes and pearl necklaces, $1,000 updos and designer heels. The air smelled of expensive perfume and catered hors d'oeuvres. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in a warm golden glow. And there I stood, the swamp monster at the ball. Every eye in that room locked onto me. Conversations died mid-sentence. Someone's fork clattered against their plate. In the corner, a guest gasped audibly, hand flying to their mouth. I didn't look at any of them. My eyes found Margaret Sterling's table in the back corner, the power position, naturally, and I walked straight toward it. Each footstep echoed in the silent silence. Thud, crunch, thud, crunch. Bella saw me first. She stood so fast her chair scraped backward. You're supposed to be in? I reached past Preston's shoulder, past his untouched plate of herb-crusted salmon, and wrapped my muddy fingers around the neck of the wine bottle, sitting in the center of their table. The vintage 1998 Cabernet Sauvignon. I held it up to the light, examining the label with exaggerated care. The bottle was already open, breathing in a crystal decanter that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. About a third of it had been poured out into the glasses around the table. "Frank," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. Behind me, the doors opened again. Frank stepped in, flanked by 2 uniformed security officers. They didn't draw weapons, but they stood with a military precision that sucked the oxygen out of the room. "I don't recall signing a release order for this 1998 vintage," I said, not taking my eyes off the bottle. Frank pulled out a tablet from his jacket, made a show of scrolling through it. His face remained professionally neutral. "No release order exists, Miss Aldridge. I've checked the inventory logs twice." Huh. I turned the bottle slowly, letting everyone get a good look. Because this particular vintage, market value is $5,000 per bottle. I heard the whisper start then, a ripple of shock moving through the crowd. 5,000? She's joking. Did she say per bottle? I set the bottle down with a deliberate clunk and turned my full attention to Bella. My little sister had gone absolutely white. Even her lips had lost their color, making her carefully applied lipstick look garish against her skin. "Receiving stolen property valued over $10,000, I said conversationally, is grand larceny in the state of California. And considering you've already consumed about $1,700 worth of this particular bottle, and I can see at least 2 more empties on that side table," I gestured with my muddy hand toward the discarded bottles. "We're well past that threshold." Preston started to stand. "Now, wait, sit down," Margaret said quietly. He sat. I pulled the wireless POS machine from my coverall pocket. A clump of dried mud fell off it and landed on the white tablecloth. "Here's how this works, Bella. You're going to pay the $85,400 you charged to this estate to Townce, right now, or you're going to leave here in a Napa County Sheriff's Cruiser. Your choice." This is insane. Bella's voice pitched higher. "This is my engagement party. You can't just—" "Wire fraud." I held up one finger. "That fake email you sent pretending to be me, that's wire fraud. Federal offense." Another finger. "Criminal trespass. You're not authorized to be on this property." A third finger. "Grand larceny. We just covered that one." I smiled, and I knew it wasn't pretty. "Want me to call in the sheriff? He's on standby. 5 minutes out. I can have you in handcuffs before dessert is served." "You're bluffing." But Bella's hand trembled as she reached for her purse. "Try me." The room had gone so quiet I could hear the ice melting in someone's water glass 3 tables away. Bella pulled out her card with shaking fingers. It was a premium card, I noticed, the kind with no preset spending limit, the kind she'd probably sweet-talked some bank manager into giving her based on her impending marriage to wealth. I held out the POS machine. She swiped. We all waited. The machine beeped once, twice. Then it displayed in bright red letters. Transaction declined. "Oh, that was sweet. That's not possible," Bella whispered. She grabbed the card back, stared at it like it had personally betrayed her. "Try it again." I didn't move. The machine works fine. You want to try another card? I don't have another card. This is Mom. She turned desperately to our mother, who was sitting 2 tables away looking like she wanted to sink through the floor. Mom, your card. I need. Turns out $85,000 is slightly above your credit limit. Funny how that works. Bella's breathing had gone shallow and rapid, panic attack territory. But I wasn't quite done yet. So here's what's happening, Bella. You have exactly 2 options. Option 1, you pay what you owe right now with cash or a valid card. Option 2, I press charges, you get arrested for multiple felonies, and this whole party becomes a crime scene. The champagne stops flowing, the catering gets shut down, and all these lovely people, I gestured around the room, get to watch you do the perp walk in your engagement dress. Personally, I think option 1 is better for everyone involved, but I'm flexible. She can't pay. Preston finally found his voice. Can't you see? She doesn't have it. We'll figure something out. We'll arrange a payment plan or a payment plan. I let the words hang in the air. For stolen goods. That's not how this works, Preston. A chair scraped. Margaret Sterling stood. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Margaret was the kind of woman who commanded attention without trying. 70 years of inherited wealth and social power radiating from her like heat from asphalt. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon. Her navy dress probably cost more than my truck. Diamond earrings caught the light when she moved. She looked at me. Really looked at me. I was covered in mud. My hair was a disaster. I was wearing rubber boots to her granddaughter's engagement party. By every social measure, I should have been beneath her notice. Something to be removed by staff. An embarrassment to be dealt with quietly. But Margaret Sterling didn't look embarrassed. She looked too assessing. Her eyes traveled from my muddy boots to my stained coveralls to my tangled hair, and then back to my face.
Every text message, every phone call, every lunch with friends, monitored and managed. She has a clothing allowance, a personal spending account with strict limits, and absolutely zero financial autonomy. She got exactly what she wanted. Wealth, status, the Sterling name. She just had to trade her freedom for it. My mother calls me cruel for allowing it. She sent me 17 text messages in the past month alone, each one a variation on the same theme. How can you let Margaret treat your sister like this? How can you stand by and watch Bella suffer? Don't you have any compassion, any family loyalty? I delete them all without responding. Because here's what my mother doesn't understand, what she's never understood. I didn't do anything to Bella. Bella made her choices. She chose to steal. She chose to lie. She chose to commit wire fraud and trespass and grand larceny. She chose to try to manipulate and con her way into wealth. All I did was refuse to be her victim. All I did was enforce consequences. And when Margaret Sterling offered to handle those consequences in her own way, to buy Bella's compliance and future behavior with the one thing Bella valued above all else, money and status, I didn't stand in the way. Margaret and I have an understanding now. We're not friends, we don't have lunch dates or exchange Christmas cards, but we respect each other. We recognize each other. 2 women who understand that power isn't given, it's taken, and that sometimes the cruelest kindness is letting people face the natural consequences of their actions. She sends me a case of wine every month, top shelf, properly released from inventory, with all the correct paperwork. I send her quarterly updates on the vineyard's performance and occasionally consult on her own wine investments. It's a good arrangement. My parents, on the other hand, are permanently banned from the Aldrich estate. They haven't contested it. After the engagement party, after being escorted off the property by security, they seemed to finally understand that their enabling days were over. No more emergency loans for Bella. No more guilt-tripping me into bailing her out. No more family dinners where I'm expected to just forgive and forget and pretend everything is fine. They made their choice. They chose Bella. They chose to support her theft and lies right up until the moment it became publicly undeniable. So I chose me, and the vineyard, and a future without parasites. Sarah, incidentally, quit 2 weeks after the incident. She sent me a resignation email that was 3 paragraphs of apologies and 1 paragraph of notice. Apparently, the guilt of being manipulated into corporate fraud, even unknowingly, was too much for her. She's working at a tourist winery now, giving tastings and selling souvenir corkscrews. It suits her better. I walk to the end of the vineyard row and look back toward the main villa. The sun is starting to sink lower, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The building looks almost ethereal in this light, All elegant stone and curved archways, generations of family history wrapped in ivy and weathered grace. It's mine. Fully. Completely. Without question. No more emergency loans being siphoned off to support someone else's delusions. No more inventory mysteriously disappearing for family events. No more having to choose between being a good sister and being a good business owner. I chose business. Turned out that was the right call. My phone buzzes again. This time it's a message from my vineyard manager. Harvest crew confirmed for next week. Looking good, boss. I smile and type back a quick confirmation. Then I walk back to the villa, stopping at tasting room on the way. I select a bottle from the reserve collection, not the 1998 vintage, something newer but equally good, and pour myself a glass. The wine is the color of rubies in the fading light, complex and rich with notes of blackberry and oak. I take it outside to the terrace, where I can watch the sun finish setting over my vines. The mud on my body that night wasn't humiliation. It wasn't the mark of someone who had been degraded or brought low. It was armor. It was a statement. It was proof that I'd prioritized what mattered. The vines, the harvest, the real work, over appearances and social performance. And when I walked into that dining room looking like a swamp monster, I wasn't the one who should have been embarrassed. They were. Bella and Preston and all those people in their designer clothes, drinking stolen wine, celebrating fraud. They were the embarrassment. They were the ones trafficking in lies and theft and empty status. I was just the woman who'd been working, who'd been doing something real and valuable and productive, while they played dress-up and pretended their world mattered. I sip my wine and watch the stars start to appear in the darkening sky. Worth it? That's the question my mother keeps asking. Was it worth destroying your relationship with your sister? Worth tearing the family apart? Worth being so cruel, so unforgiving? Here's my answer. Look at my vineyard. Look at my harvest. Look at my business thriving and growing and succeeding. Look at me standing here, debt-free, parasite-free, free. Yeah, it was worth it. So here's where I turn it over to you guys, because I genuinely want to know what you think. My sister got her dream wedding, her wealthy husband, her place in Napa Valley society. She got everything she said she wanted. The fact that it came with strings attached, okay, more like chains attached, isn't my fault. She made her choices. My mother says I'm cruel. She says I should have handled it privately, should have changed into a nice dress, should have confronted Bella quietly without humiliating her in front of 100 guests. She says letting Margaret enslave Bella over money makes me just as bad as the people I claim to despise. But here's my question for you. Option A, did I go too far? Should I have cleaned up, put on something presentable, and handled the whole situation behind closed doors? Would that have been the right thing to do? Option B, or was the muddy entrance the perfect power move? Was walking in there looking like I'd just crawled out of a swamp, showing everyone exactly where I'd been and what I'd been doing while they played their social games, the only way to make the point? Let me know in the comments. Would you have called the cops and pressed charges? Would you have taken Margaret's money and walked away? Or would you have done something completely different? I read every single one of them. And trust me, after 6 months of my mother's guilt trips, I could use some outside perspective. Because from where I'm standing, in my vineyard, with my wine, watching my harvest ripen under a California sunset, I think I made exactly the right call. But maybe that's just me. What do you think?